I am excited for today's guest. He has a background in leadership. He's a mentor. He's a children's book author. He's a parenting advocate. He's a Marine. He's going to talk to us about how to create, here he is, more resilient kids. And certainly we know that people in this audience are dealing. And I know from our own community as well that one of our biggest fears is that our kids are not going to be okay, especially in the midst of all of the conflict. So thank you so much, Olaolu, for coming on today. And before we even get started, first, because I know we're going to talk about the influence of other people, how impactful do you think it is, or how important is it to have other influences in our kids' lives? Because I know sometimes we feel like the parents are the only ones and the kid will be ruined if we're both not perfect.
Oh yeah. So first of all, I'll start by saying thank you so much for having me. It's an honor. But really, I believe it is extremely important. In fact, so important that I just don't believe parents can do it on their own. Whether it's a two-parent home or single family home, it doesn't matter. You have to have other influences in your life. And I know sometimes, especially for us parents, we really know what's best for our children. And at times that leads us to not want to allow others to come into our life and influencing them. But I have to say that that is extremely important for us. And in fact, it was part of who I am growing up. That's a part of everything that I talk about and everything I do. I truly believe that community is the way.
Okay, I agree. But I think our society has really changed in the past few decades where we become more isolated in general and especially our families. But before we get into that, why don't you introduce yourself officially and tell us a little bit about who you are and your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Olaolu Ogunyemi. I'm a U.S. Marine officer. That's what I do every single day, and I absolutely love it. I'm a founder of ParentChildConnect.com, which is a website dedicated to building emerging leaders. So we provide resources for parents, teachers, mentors, and caregivers so they can go out and help mentor and guide a future generation of leaders. And then we rolled directly into my family, and that's really what I love my family. I have a wife and three kids. And they really are the ones who come behind me and support me along the way. So I have a lot of love for my wife and my three kids, 16-year-old girl, 11-year-old boy, and a 6-year-old girl. So very, very spread who we have there. And it's just very exciting to dive in. And then I grew up in Ruston, Louisiana. My dad actually immigrated from Nigeria to the United States for college. He met my mom. They moved to Louisiana, and that's where we grew up. So a lot of influence from just growing up in the South and growing up learning different things about family. It's a large family. My siblings and I, we talk every single day. So we believe in family. We believe in teamwork. We believe in community. We believe with talking to other people and engaging with them as you walk by. So that's really a lot about me, and that's my background.
Yeah, wow. Thank you. Very impressive. So let's talk about the connection between community and resilience a bit.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So as I said, I'm a huge family man, and what I realized is, even in my own family, I have I think 24 nieces and nephews, and what I realized is that I have yeah exactly it's a lot. It's I blame my siblings. I have three technically, and so obviously, but it's six of us, and so we spread those 23 over the six of us. So technically, I guess I have really 21 nieces and nephews. But yeah, we sort of that's one of the things I realized. I have an obligation. I feel like it's an obligation to help mentor and guide them and provide things to help them along their way because we all have our own journeys. But it's just amazing, especially as a guy who grew up. I was a knucklehead. For those parents out there who want to see what it's like on the other side, I always was getting in trouble. I wanted to fit in. I was very insecure growing up. But it only took other people saying the same thing that my parents were saying and reinforcing those values and the things that they deemed important that finally helped to sink in. Because my dad and mom, they always were working on me and trying to help me grow through things. But you'll be surprised how many times it took somebody else saying the same thing, maybe in a slightly different way, because they related to me differently. So my coaches that I had growing up related to me differently than my parents could. And
Mhm.
same thing with every other mentor and person that I had in my life helped me go through a lot of the challenges I had as a young adult. So really, that's what I believe. That influence helps us to grow into the adults that we are and the people that we are, and helps us to grow through all of those challenges and circumstances we go through in childhood.
All right. So you mentioned that you're a former knucklehead. Um, and I told you that the people in our community, some of their kids are knuckleheads and some of them are not, but acting like knuckleheads because they're dealing with a lot of external issues which are really impacting their emotional health, especially because of the level of conflict in the families. I know that a lot of our parents are like, my kid needs help. They don't want to see a therapist. Like if I could just find a coach or a mentor for my kid, how can we even start to look when we are as a society not as connected to other people as we used to be? Like as a parent, what advice would you to give to someone who's like, I'm freaking out, my ex is awful, my kid is suffering, and I still want my kid to have other trusted adults?
Yeah, so first of all, breathe, because I know what that feels like to have that pressure on you because you have these human beings that are relying on you. There's all these other circumstances out there, and so take a breath. First and foremost, understand that you are in the same kind of struggle that a lot of parents in. We all have this tension between us and how we're going to raise our children. So take a deep breath and exhale. All right. So that's where we're going to start. And then I'll recommend going into just starting to try to learn a little bit more about what exactly are you trying to do for your child? What exactly is the gap that you're looking to fill? Because in many ways, I think we misidentify the gap at times. We say that the child is acting because dot, dot, dot. And we really
Yeah.
don't know. For example, as I said, I was a prior knucklehead. Sometimes my wife may argue I'm a current knucklehead. But I'd offer that if somebody were to see me acting out, the first thing they'll say is that, well, he's with the wrong crowd, which is fair. I mean, I was around some people who were doing things that were wrong, but we never really stopped to understand the root cause. Why was I acting out? Why was I with that crowd? Perhaps that was the only crowd that accepted me, right? And so instead of me diving in and saying, okay, this is what's wrong with the child, and I need to fix this problem, I need to fill this gap. First, start trying to identify the root problem. Try to ask them questions, leading questions to understand what's going on in their minds. And then, as you said, yeah, we have to learn to reconnect with other people and have to learn to regain that trust that we have in others. Because right now, you're right, there's just a lot of division, there's a lot of distrust out there. And yes, we want to protect our children from the world, but we can't do that at the risk of not allowing them to grow and connect with others.
Yeah. So one thing you just mentioned too was figuring out why a child is acting a certain way or why they're with certain other people. And you said the word acceptance. How important
Mhm.
is acceptance as a theme when it comes to raising resilient kids?
Oh, very. Because so acceptance is all around us, right? So I'm in the United States Marine Corps, for example. I joined the Marine Corps because of that idea of acceptance. And I know a lot of people, we have many things that we talk about with recruiting, but that's why I joined. I joined because I wanted to be a part of something bigger than myself, but not just anything. I wanted to be a part of the ones that said they were the best, the ones that said they were the sharpest, and all these kind of things. And I made that life altering decision based upon my need for acceptance. So we know acceptance is extremely important, and that's why we have to learn what is the child trying to be accepted for. In
Mm.
my case, I was being made fun of because I was overweight. My name was Olaolu Ogunyemi, and like I said, I grew up in Ruston, Louisiana, not necessarily a place where that name is common. I had this gap in my teeth. I had all these things that were just that I just was insecure about, and so I went to the crowd who would accept me for the things that I was doing. So I would do whatever it takes to be accepted. And so when I would do those things, of course, that would lead to trouble and so on and so forth. And so that's really what it boiled down to is why was I out there trying to be accepted? And then once I was accepted, was that truly building my resilience? And the answer to that question is no, it wasn't building my resilience in the way that in a positive way. Technically, I was becoming more resilient. I was becoming more smart on how to deal with the world around me. I was understanding how to avoid dangerous situations. But I also was headed directly towards a path that was not going to be returnable, and I definitely would be sitting where I am today. So acceptance is extremely important. So first and foremost, I think as parents, if you see your child acting out, just look at them and wonder and ask them, what am I accepting him? Am I doing everything I can to wrap my arms around him or her and bring them in and accept them as a part of this family or a part of my world? Or am I also having so many things going on with me that now I'm in a way just treating them as a patient or treating them as I would just somebody else who's not really connected to me. So that acceptance is extremely important when it comes to resilience.
Yeah. I'm as everything you're saying, it's like making me think of more ideas than what I had planned to ask you. So I'm just going to go in those directions. You mentioned insecurity. There are extraordinarily high levels of anxiety and ADHD being diagnosed specifically in our community where kids are so insecure and anxious. Do you have advice for parents of like how to start dealing with that? I don't know if they're picking up on our own um, fear and anxiety. But what do you think about dealing with anxious children as parents? Like, how do we start?
Well, first of all, we have to realize that they're growing up in a different world than we are. And I like to always tell people I'm in my prime, I'm so young, and all this kind of stuff. But the world transition is such a fast way, and the technology evolved in such a way that they're dealing with a different world than we dealt with. And so I think we need to start by acknowledging that they're getting with information nonstop. I mean, they're being fed all these different things, which for us, we just know unplug, right? We turn off the news, we turn off our phones and cameras, and we're done. It's not really we didn't grow up as that a part of our world, so to speak. A lot of us got our first like cell phones that in like high school and maybe college, and really we were that cell phone didn't do much, but play Snake, and your internet was so slow it was unusable, right? So really we didn't that wasn't a part of our world until later into our adult lives. For our children, though, that is a part of their world. They have been receiving information this whole time. So telling them to basically disconnect from that is may not be as realistic. So the way I always encourage parents is to get into their world. First of all, understand what information they're receiving and why, what's causing that anxiety. Do not, as sometimes as a parent, especially as a Marine, as a tough guy, or whatever else you want to call it, it's easy to say, oh, come on now, are you serious? I mean, when I was growing up, blah, 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 dot, dot, dot. But you have to be very, very careful of discarding their feelings. You have to acknowledge how they feel in that moment. Doesn't mean you have to agree with it, but you have to acknowledge it and know what's going on. And a lot of it, again, is because of that information they're receiving. So get into that information channel, understand what's influencing them in that way. So that way you can start speaking, countering it, or in some cases, you can work along with, collaborate with those influences and figure out what you can do to help sway their opinions or their world. But you're right. It's a hard problem. It really is a hard problem that I don't believe any generation has dealt with before us. And now we're just learning how to continue to be great parents. But I think the concepts are the same. Get in your parents, or excuse me, get in your children's rooms and just get along with them. Understand what's influencing them.
Yeah, yeah, that's great advice. So with your background, I used to be a high school English teacher, and I always think about how discipline, I'm not talking about punishment, but discipline really helped in terms of me teaching my students as well as parenting. How important do you think discipline is in terms of providing structure for kids? Because I feel like when kids don't have structure, they have more anxiety.
Yeah, that's a perfect question. And I love what you just said. You said, I'm talking about discipline, not necessarily punishment. And that's the problem with the way we look at discipline. That's why it's almost like a bad word for us. Discipline, in its root form, I was like doing some studies on this. It really is referring to a teacher and a pupil. That's where discipleship or discipline is supposed to be about.
Mm.
And so if we take our perspective and shift it back to that and say, okay, I am a teacher and this child is a pupil, then we can also realize that they are there to accept our teaching, right? We're not trying to force our teaching upon them, which is what that punishment comes into play when they do wrong. We force them to do what we ask them to do. No, we're trying to bring that teaching to them and have them accept it for them themselves. Why is that important? And I use this example all the time. So when my youngest one was, my children were young, they would go out in the street. In my mind, the initial discipline action would be if they were going to wander into the street without looking both ways, I grab them and they always remember that dad grabbed me before I crossed the street. But that only is that's getting compliance in the moment. That's not really instilling discipline. And so
Mhm.
if all they can think of is dad grabbed me before I went across the street, they're not understanding why they need to search both ways before they
Mhm.
cross the street. And that means they didn't accept my teaching. And that's what we have to start getting to the point of where we understand that discipline is about teaching them. So instead of me grabbing them every time, and yes, if it's a safety thing, of course I need to grab and snatch them back. But instead of me grabbing them every time, maybe walk them out to the street and say, hey, here's what happens if you cross the street without looking both ways. And then you teach them, and now they're more apt to understand and take on that same level of what you're talking about, that pupil and teacher level, type of discipline. And now they're ready to cross the street when it's time. And now they have what we call self-discipline. Now they are going to do the right thing, the teaching that we gave them when we're not around. And so that's really what I believe discipline is all about, and how I believe it contributes to our ability to be resilient.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love it. And I love how you took the root of discipline to disciple and the difference
Mhm.
between discipline versus compliance.
Yeah.
The parallel that I see in our community is parents wanting to protect their children from any um, bad feelings or discomfort, and being like, my kid isn't safe if they have to deal with a really difficult other parent, and versus teaching the kids how to learn to advocate for themselves. And obviously this depends on safety and it depends on the kid's age, but I feel that teaching a child critical thinking skills as well as how to advocate for themselves are some of the strongest powers you can teach them. What do you think?
Mhm.
What other things besides critical thinking skills and self advocacy are important for kids to learn?
Oh, absolutely. So I would believe that aside from critical thinking and self-advocacy, excuse me, I believe that we just have to teach them to understand the world around them, and that's empathy. So understand people and the world and how they fit in the world around them. Because a lot of times I think we become self-centered just by nature, right? We're always trying to figure out a way to survive. That's just human nature. And I believe that first of all, teaching our children how to use the devices and the technology. As I said, it's with them. It's going to be there, so we're not gonna get rid of it. So we might as well teach them how to use it. Use it to connect to others and to grow relationship with others, and to figure out how to understand their feelings and have conversations that are heartfelt. Those things are extremely important because when you learn how to empathize with somebody else, this magical thing happens. You start learning how to deal with your own emotions and feelings. And then the second thing is we have to model that. What you're talking about is we first have to model the behavior that we want them to do, right? So if I want, again, go back to the easy scenario, because I know that's an easy one for us to talk about. If I want them to look both ways, but I never check both ways before I cross the street, the chances of them accepting that and knowing that that's going to be something that's important for them is going to be slim to none. So really, I would say the first thing is to set the example, and the second thing is to teach them empathy and understand the world around them. And then the last thing I'll say is raising their emotional intelligence. And the way that I started trying to practice that in my home is finding ways to teach them how to identify their emotion. Because that's one of the problems that we have. We have when it comes to understanding and identifying emotion, we have a very limited vocabulary. We know happy, mad, sad. And sometimes we know like fearful or frightful, but that's about it. And then we allow our children to stop there as well. So, for example, when your child walks in from school, or when they're feeling back down, you say, "Hey, how are you?" And they say, "I'm good. I'm good. I'm all right. I don't want to talk about it." And you leave it there. You're not necessarily teaching them how to deal with their emotion or how to build their emotional intelligence. So, what you need to do, what I recommend for people, is to go and define more emotions. So you can go to Google, and this is what I did. I went to Google and I searched for emotions, and you can list out, it's like 50 to 100 different emotions, and then put them up on the board. So when my 6 year old or any of my children walk in, I say, "Hey, how was school today?" And usually their response is good.
Yeah.
Okay, so how did you feel about school or the bus ride home? And what was amazing is my 6 year old, for example, and I used her because it's such a young age. But once I saw her catching on, I knew the other two were going to be able to catch on as well. My 6 year old said, "Well, I was energetic at school and very excited to be there." All right, she's reading. She's going to read the board that I have hung up.
Good.
But then I actually feel disappointed. I'm disappointed in my friend, and this is a 6 year old conversation, which I
That's
thought was
awesome.
amazing.
Yeah.
Right. And then we were able to dive down into what that was. Why is that important? What happened? And we started talking through her friend who, was on the bus. Somebody said a joke and her friend jumped on board and started going at her. And then when they had the most important thing about this, and goes back to what we're talking about, the most important thing is when we had a discussion that told her, "Hey, have you talked to your friend about it? Here's what you can say to your friend." She goes on the bus the very next day and has that discussion. And her friend, which I commend the parents on the other side, her friend says, "I'm so sorry. I did not mean to make you feel that way." And just imagine if we could take that unique scenario and start to grow it in our daily interactions with each other, first of all, and then with our children. Man, it'll be amazing. So I would say that's the next thing. So empathy and emotional intelligence are probably the two biggest things that we can help teach our children.
Yeah, and as you're describing what I always think of as emotional literacy, you're connecting the ability to name and label feelings to self-advocacy,
Hmm.
because it's
That's right.
understanding this is how I feel, and now actually I could do something with that because I understand myself better. So
Yeah.
yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
And
All
then
right.
teaching them that not everybody's going to respond in kind. That's another part of being resilient. Just because you go out and you say something very powerful and profound, that person may say, I don't care, bye. And teaching them how, okay, what do you do next? And so really it's preparing them for scenarios. It's putting them into different kind of conversations with you and saying, hey, this is what could happen. You could go out there and have this perfect, you can be all meditated and you'd be calm and ready to tackle the day, and then you go to that person and confront them, and they may say, I don't care, get out of my face. And they walk away. Then what are you going to do? How do you prepare for that? So those are the kind of things that we also encourage.
Yeah, yeah, love it, love it. All right, tell us a little bit about your book, Crow from the Shadow.
Oh yeah, so Crow from the Shadow is one of my favorite children's books. I've written three, but Crow from the Shadow is my favorite, really because it came from a personal space for me. So it's the shadow is loosely defined. I intentionally did that because the shadow is a person, place, or thing that tells you cannot be what you want to be. So throughout the book, I chose Crow, which is not a likely hero, because if you think about what we all perceive a crow to be, it's a nasty animal that's like digging through our trash, making a bunch of noise, and so on and so
Crows
forth.
are brilliant.
And but they're brilliant. Thank you. And most people don't realize that crows are actually very brilliant birds, and they're out there doing exactly what a lot of us are doing, trying to survive, right?
Yeah.
And so I chose that character because that reason. Number one, crows are brilliant. Number two, people don't know much about crows. And number three, as you go throughout the book and you realize that Crow is saying that the shadow told him he can't do this, he can't do that. But then he finally gets to the end and he realizes that no, I can determine my own future. So that's the message I want everybody to think of when they see a crow, which I've been all over the world, and there are crows all over the world. And so once you see a crow, you think, I determine my own future. And that's really what Crow from the Shadow is about. It's saying that no matter where you're from, no matter what your name is, no matter what you're going through or have been through, you still have control of your own destiny if you take control of your life.
You're making me think. We actually, me and my kids who are now in their 20s, went to Alaska to celebrate my daughter's college graduation. And we saw some huge crows. And I had recently read an article about them. I didn't realize crows are so smart that they can hold grudges.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's actually one. So the funny thing is when you're talking about that, but in the back of my book, Proof in the Shadow, that's one of the facts I put there. And it's a funny way of doing it because I do like continue the conversation questions and then I do fun facts about crows or in Billy Dipper's Time to Shine, stars, and astronomy. So when I presented that fact, a lot of people thought it was funny because I said, "Hey, crows can remember your face, so if you throw a rock at them, you better
Yeah.
mind your manners when you're
Yeah.
around them." And I didn't realize that, but I had to, as I read about it and learned more about crows, I was like, man, this is an amazing bird. This is an amazing animal. And I thought it
Yeah.
was pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is. Um, So I was going to say that also, can you tell us a little bit about what is Parent Child Connect or Lead Last?
Absolutely. So Parent Child Connect is really it's an organization that's designed to bring parents back into their children's lives. So one of the things that we always talk about is that we want parents to be in their child's life. We want adults to be in the child's life. And that came from a place where I actually was writing these books. Initially, just wrote it to sit down and connect with my children,
Mhm.
whether it be my oldest daughter, which so for everybody to know, I graduated college. I was 22. I was married with a 3-year-old, which means I was completely clueless. I grew up in a household of six, but my two older sisters were 12 and 14 years older, so they were older and they almost felt like a second and third mom to me.
Mhm.
Vice like a sibling that I go in, I clash with and things of that nature. So the four boys, man, we just clashed, and then we would clash in such a way that people would call our parents thinking that we're about to fight. And then by the time our parents showed up, they're like, "Yeah, these guys are laughing and having a good time together. What are you guys talking about? What's the emergency?"
Mhm.
And so I tried to take that same approach to parenting and realize that it's not going to work. It didn't work with my oldest daughter. And so I wanted to create this environment and this book series that allows parents to sit down and connect with their children because really that's where it starts. It starts with a connection before we're able to do anything else. And that when it goes all the way back to everything that you're talking about here and in your entire platform, is that if we don't have that connection with a child or find a way to continually connect with them, then we won't be able to influence them when the time, especially when times get rough. So that's really what Parent Child Connects is about: is providing resources for adults. So that's parents, teachers, mentors, caregivers, coaches, whoever's in that community and works with children, to sit down with children and grow beyond where they are. So that's what Parent Child Connect is. That's what the book series is about. Lead Last is actually my first leadership book. So this is a book for emerging leaders. So it's going now on the opposite end of parenting. So if you imagine Parent Child Connect has mainly been focused on that 0 to about 17 range. Now Lead Last is going to pick up where that stops. And that's now teaching the person, the human, the leader, how to be a better leader, how to understand that yes, we have to have vibrato about us when we're leaders. We want to be like King Leonidas on 300, which is one of my favorite movies, by the way. We want to be in front of everybody, we want to yell and scream and throw our hands up. But in reality, the leader doesn't necessarily equal that person. A lot of times, the leader is the person who is behind their team and pushing them forward, or beneath their team when great things are happening, and they're lifting them up to celebrate them. So that's what Lead Last is all about. It's a book that I've written, and really, it's more of a concept that's going to go well beyond the sales of that book. So right now, it's scheduled to be released in spring of next year, and I'm working with Amplify Publishing Group, so I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, yeah, congratulations. So how
Thank
can
you.
people find you and your books?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best way to find me is to go to parent-child-connect.com. You'll see my books. You see all of my resources. You'll see my content partnership with YouVersion Bible app. And so you see all kinds of things there. So parent-child-connect.com.
Thank you so much for this. This has been great. I love your energy. And of course, thank you for your service in more than just for our country.
Thank you so much. Like I said, it's been an honor. I've been looking forward to this, so I'm excited to have the opportunity to talk to you.
Yeah, yeah, me too. I have a feeling that you're going to be hearing from some people in our community.
I appreciate you. Absolutely.
All right, take care and let's definitely stay in touch.
All right, yes, we'll do. Thank you.
Bye.